remember things. It's more than just void, darkness, unconsciousness. The mind does work. There are images, patterns, things to recollect. It's not just the long, deep sleep that comes when the fear has left. The cold is felt, the slipping away of feeling is noted and then succumbed to. The mind functions. Time is distorted, jumbled, telescoped, accordion, but there is a sense of time even so. And I remember things. I remember the way it began. I remember the way it was in the beginning.
Daddy, I think he's lost his mind. He's never been like this before. Tonight he was almost raving.
What did he say?
Oh, crazy things. That he's some kind of a spaceman and that they're taking over the Earth and that we're all going to die.
Better give him some help.
Goes 70 times faster than the speed of light.
Mentally disturbed.
When the space agency put me on my watch, don't listen to me. They told me to keep in mind the scientific part. And what do we know about our latest man?
Better give him some help.
Don't listen to him. He's one of us. He's with the advanced unit.
Unit? What kind of advanced unit, son?
Don't fight them, son.
It'll only make it more difficult for all of us.
Mentally disturbed.
Hey, everybody. So it's September 15th, 2022. And I am your host, Michael O'Toole. Hello. It is going to be, it's either going to be episode 110 or I think 111 of Experimentally Ill, my podcast where I talk to artists and entertainers and my friends here in the New England area. And you can check us out on experimentally.com, and you can find it on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all that stuff. And I'm here with my friend and a guy who co-hosted and co-produced some of the earlier episodes of Experimentally Ill.
I recommend that you do not.
Please do not listen to those.
Yeah, do not. Yeah, I really recommend you don't. But hey folks, I'm Lawrence Hollie. Hey.
Hi.
I'm Michael O'Toole's friend.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. So, anyway, I came from, a couple of days ago, I just came from a memorial service at the Arts at the Armory in Somerville, Mass. for our friend Mick Cusimano, who was on some earlier episodes of the podcast. And he was a great surrealist poet, cartoonist, and filmmaker, and a writer, and people who follow the New England film media industry would know him from Imagine magazine. He had a comic strip in Imagine called Imagination, where he did cartoons about the local film scene, and actually drew us as cartoons about 10 or 11 or 12 years ago. Something like 10, 11, 12 years ago, because myself and Lawrence were in some of his movies, like Don't Spill the Eggs, and which was, I think, one of the more surrealist movies he ever made, he was saying at the time. And Monkey Do, Monkey Don't was the other one. And I came from that memorial service, which was for Mick and a couple of other artists in the scene. And I was plugging some of those earlier podcast episodes that you should definitely check out, where I interviewed Mick Cusimano, the professor of surrealism, and hear in his own words his life story and everything. But I wanted to just kind of get it out of my system and check in with Lawrence too. They let me on. I was up in front of everybody, kind of gave a little bit of a speech and read one of Mick's poems, Early Morning Blues, and I was mentioning Lawrence because that was sort of the entryway into the Mick world, as I used to when I was hanging out with you when working at the Brookline cable access station, and Mick Cusimano would come in there to submit his cartoons and have them screened. And so I was talking about Lawrence, and I figured, it would be a cool thing to have us back doing the podcast and talk a little bit more about Mick and stuff. So, yeah. So
here we are, folks. I think for just to bring people up to speed, because not everyone is coming at this, unfortunately, hearing the old episodes, which I highly recommend you should.
Yeah, but if you haven't,
some really good interviews with Mick. But for those who are green with the whole Cusimano scene, Mick Cusimano was not only our dear friend, but an artist, a filmmaker, and poet who resided in Cambridge, kind of the periphery, the border of Cambridge, Massachusetts, and Somerville, Massachusetts. I don't really know much about his early life. I can only bring folks up to speed with what we know. And what we do know is that Mick was very active in the poetry scene as far back as like the late 60s. Just to bring people, just to let people know, Mick, I know this makes for great podcasting, but Mick just passed away. He was 71 years old. So, if we're looking at the late 60s, he's in his 20s. And he's a, what would you call it, bohemian sort of. You travel around, get involved in these different poetry scenes, hippie scenes. And then throughout the 70s, he starts settling into this, what would you call it, like surreal poetry, right?
Yeah, he talked about like discovering surrealism. Like he got like a book on surrealism, and I mean he was like a product of sort of the beat generation, right? The beat poets and sort of
Kerouac. Let me interrupt you, Mike. It's like you're right. Like he's more of a beatnik than a hippie.
Yeah. Or like
that's an important distinction.
Yeah, outlaw poetry.
He's less Timothy Leary and more like Albert Camus or.
But Timothy Leary was definitely like a signpost. I mean, he talked about. You can see on Cusimano's website, M. Cusiman, so it's like Cusimano without the O, mcusiman.tripod.com. He has a lot of his writings and stuff and travelogues and stuff. One of the cool things that I liked is he talks about he went to a what do you call it, like a beat poet kind of conference where he saw like Timothy Leary speak, and that was the one where he saw Hunter S. Thompson on stage. Hunter S. Thompson started smoking a bong on stage, and then after the show he was able to give Thompson, right before he got mobbed with people, he was able to give him a copy of his magazine he used to publish himself called Underground Surrealist Magazine. And that's where Mick would put in like his own, I think, writing and poetry and definitely his cartoons and stuff, and would get other people from all over the place, I think, internationally, like they would submit to this magazine that I found out, at least for a year, was distributed in all of Tower Records, which, that's a relic, I guess, itself now, but it was distributed to all the Tower Records throughout the U.S., I guess. So he talked about, he said by the 80s and 90s, he was part of the zine revolution, where people were just making these little magazines of their own, and I guess like maybe in the back of the magazines they would have ways to submit to like the other ones, so that was kind of like a social networking kind of thing before, social media, right, as we know it, online. I was like, how do you find like these people and how do you find this stuff? But yeah, definitely like a guy into the counterculture, and those are the kind of people I like to meet and talk to, and we were lucky enough to be in some of his so I want to say earlier movies, but he had been making movies a few years, before he met us.
Just to dial it back a little bit, like let's go to the 80s, because I remember I want to do even another podcast where it's even more of a deep dive, but I was around the time of Mick's passing. I did like a Mick Cusimano archaeological information dig.
Yeah.
And I came up with I found like some photos of Mick in New York in like 1984.
Mm-hmm.
And he was hanging out with what appeared to be his predecessor. His predecessor's the one that went before you, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
His predecessor's the one before you or after you? DL's going to say how stupid I am.
Before. Pre.
Well, yeah, the the progenitor comes after. Predecessor's before. Pre-pro, right?
You can cut this out.
You can cut it, but you get what I'm saying, right? I found like what seems to be Mick's prototype in a poet, a New York poet, named Are You Out of It? You know about this guy?
Well, I heard about him. Mick was from Buffalo, New York, and then at some point, I think it's like '86, he came to Boston, where originated. But yeah, Are You Out of It? I knew Are You Out of It because I heard about him from I know he was a member of the Friars of Prometheus, which was this troupe of poets that Mick was part of, that was led by, I think it was led by Billy Barnum, who was a poet who was older, 20 or 30 years older than Mick, and he was, I guess, is somehow related to P.T. Barnum, and I guess the Barnum and Bailey circus guys.
Interrupt. Mm-hmm. These guys were, in other words, in context, Are You Out of It and Barnum, those guys were like what Mick is to us.
Yeah, it is true. He was like the rookie guy, like the newbie guy, and he came across them, and that's when he, in my interview, in his words, he said, if these guys can write, if these knuckleheads can write poetry, I can write poetry. So I remember what he said. He was like, he would do cartoons, and somehow they saw the cartoons, and so he first did a few flyers for their poetry shows, and then he would like go to the shows and see the poetry, and then just said, if they can write poetry, I can write poetry. So he started to he started to do his thing, and eventually was part of that group, Fire of Prometheus, which was like Billy Barnum, Are You Out of It, and then there was like a woman, Zantara, which I'm trying to, if anybody hears this and they know of any of these guys who are still around.
Yeah, if any of these are ringing a bell.
Yeah, at some point it would be cool to get into contact with those guys and interview those guys and girl. And that was sort of like performance art kind of. It's more like kind of counterculture, like poetry thing that sort of like try to push the boundaries, and outlaw poetry.
Right. It's a lot of info. That's a lot of info. Hold it. Let me chime in, because I know how it goes. It's admirable, but let's break it down. Hammer time is so just going back a bit, dialing it back to around the time when Mick was getting involved with Are You Out of It. One of the cool events they had, like these set of 1984 photos showing Mick and the Are You Out of It guy, they were doing an event where they were celebrating like X amount of days being alive and not dying of a nuclear holocaust. Because it was the 80s, everyone was worried about the Cold War, and especially in 83, 84, it was like at a fever pitch. So Are You Out of It and Mick, they were all holding this, and like a whole bunch of other assorted artists and eccentric types were holding this event about celebrating being alive and not being destroyed by the bomb for like, it's like the 186th day of not dying in a Holocaust, and like that was, just putting the pieces together, I gleaned that I think Are You Out of It sort of sparked the change in Mick, or it facilitated the change over to really leaning into the surrealistic poetry. What do you call it? Like the spearheader and being someone who's involved in groups and getting other people to get involved in his mayhem. I think Are You Out of It was a big influence on Mick, from what I could tell. And this is all a lot of speculation and my own thoughts and whatnot. This is all. We're getting to the point. We're getting to the portion where we meet him. I promise, audience. But
we only have a few more decades.
The short story. The short story is, without doing a huge info dump, because I'm telling you, people's eyes glaze over when it's a long one. The short story is, Mick, throughout the 80s and 90s, gets involved with a lot of artist groups, a lot of poetry groups, goes on a lot of adventures around the world, gets involved in like a rave in England. He talks about how he stumbled into this rave in England where he met a chick, and it was like a rave, and he just kind of went along with it.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah, that was one of my favorite pieces of his writing.
Yeah, all these events helped to shape the man that Mick ultimately became, because, audience, Mick didn't make his first movie until he was 50 years old. Mm-hmm. So that would have been, what, he was 71 this year, so that's 2022. Mm-hmm. Right?
So like early 2000s.
Early 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
He's only been making movies up until the point of his passing. He'd only been making movies for 20-something years.
Yeah.
And that, arguably, at least to us, is the most well-known and celebrated part of his long career. Mm-hmm. And just to say, by the way, Mick's day job, he worked in, like, the mailroom at Harvard University. Like, a true superhero story.
Yeah.
Humble man goes to work in the mailroom, but then when he leaves, he's the professor of surrealism.
Yeah.
And he's and not just award-winning.
Yeah.
Upon becoming a filmmaker, Mick was prolific, and he was hard-working. He would get all of his movies out in the festivals. Not all of them would choose him, but to the ones that did, he won some awards. He got into the festivals. He got around, like, internationally.
Yeah, and he traveled. He was in,
That's a whole other part of his...
Yeah, it started out, like, prior to that early 2000s where he was, he was all about, like, performance poetry. Like, I think with the Fire of Prometheus, they did, like, hundreds of shows, countless shows, and he, like, toured around New York and, all over. And, right, like, a world traveler, like, went to London. He talked about that.
You could find a lot of videos, like, old videos from, like, the 80s and 90s of Mick at, like, different events and, like, cable access appearances. Like, it's so uncanny valley because it looks like a deep-faked young Mick. Like they do the Marvel de-aging.
Well, so
holy shit, that looks like a young guy like Christopher Reeve, but Mick's voice is coming out of him.
he did those early the poetry readings. It was I think he had organized then, like, his own coffee house where it was originally, I found out, it was originally called the Naked City. And then that is what later became Squawk Coffee House. And they would have...
Squawk Coffee House, right. Did Mick have anything to do with the Moth in Cambridge?
I don't think so. I don't know if he ever did anything there, but, did a lot of shows around Boston, too.
And we do know that Mick was was one of the denizens of the Out of the Blue Cafe over in Cambridge, which was a small artist studio where poets would go, and it was a pretty celebrated location for artists and eccentrics, wasn't it?
Yeah. Out of the blue. Out of the. Imagine they put that, like, on the marquee, like we have eccentrics here. Yeah, out of the blue the out of the blue art
that's
gallery.
what was there. I mean,
Yeah, no,
you would get artists
I know
doing
that.
their legit thing, and then you get the people who came in and they pee on the couch. And that's the
I just
story.
remember when we had our early the precursors to our film festival, Experimentally Ill, the Random Acts of Insubordination, and Tom Tipton, who was running the gallery, when I had spilled a Red Bull energy drink out of my bag, and you know what kind of, not everyone certainly, but what crowd it is when his first instinct is to assume we peed on his couch. So yeah,
He just asked so casually, like, peed on the couch. Like it was he was annoyed, but he knew it was like a normal thing.
Yeah, it's like you were relaxed.
That's the type of people you got in there.
Yeah, well, that's what I like about Mick. Like if you check out the travelogue writing, I feel is sort of like underrated. It's like he definitely was a poet. People would read his poetry, but in retrospect, I feel like and that's why I started to really get into his stuff and go on the site to be able to read it, which I think some of that stuff was published in some magazines. I'm sure some stuff was in his Underground Surrealist, which he sent me a few copies. It was like a glossy magazine. I mean, it looked like a magazine, which now it's like, younger people are like, what's a magazine? Like it's like a website, but in paper. Like, yeah.
Forget a zine, what's a magazine?
Yeah, exactly. Right. That's
a magazine, eh?
I was watching that Will Friedle and Christy Carlstrom Romano, they do that podcast I Hear Voices, where they interview voice actors, and that Friedle can't, I mean, maybe he's in his 40s, or maybe he's older, I don't know, but they're always stopping the show going, and now kids, the VCR was a thing before or the phone was a thing where, you would just make calls on it, and then, it's not even that long ago.
Telephone was something that people had.
Yeah.
But back to Mick, though.
Yeah,
before we go off on a tangent.
Exactly.
Mick. So if you want to put Mick into pop culture terms, for something that's easily digestible to most people, everybody knows Batman. So think of the 70s, 80s, and 90s, where Mick is traveling around the world and getting involved with weirdos. That's his period. That's the period where Bruce Wayne goes to train with the League of Shadows in like Tibet. He's going around the world and he's getting to know what surreal means.
Yeah.
And you out is probably going to make, you have to become an idea. You have to become surreal. And young Mick is like, oh, all right, okay.
Surrealism, I mean, he was interested in, I think, classic art forms like that. And he's discovered surrealism, and it was just that idea that he didn't have to be held to the tyranny of meaning, that you could do weird things and sort of turn things on their head and challenge people with what you were doing.
Challenge the norms.
Yeah.
Let me finish the illustration. So, so he trains with, Mick Tuss is training with the League of Surrealists. And then Mick, noble hero that he is, decides to bring that brand of surrealism back to his home. Well, not really his home turf. He was born in Buffalo, New York. Mm-hmm. So he brings it to us humble people in Boston, Massachusetts, in the form of films in like 2001. Mm-hmm. That's where Mick becomes the Batman, or as we know him, the Professor of Surrealism.
That's right. Well, I think he was announcing himself as the Professor of Surrealism on YouTube in the 80s or probably the 90s. By then he had some sketches. He
really came into it with the films.
The idea was
the culmination of his efforts.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead.
Oh, I just want to say, the idea is that he would have these poetry events in the coffee houses and stuff, and he told me it was a lot of poets that were just performing to each other, and so what if you brought them out onto the street kind of thing and got them to sort of a wider audience, and he went and bought a video camera, and the only people he knew around Boston at the time who would do something like that were poets, and he talked about how hard it could be to kind of direct those guys. Like poets will do anything you could imagine because they're so used to speaking about the most personal things on stage, but they wouldn't do exactly what he told them to do. But his first video was called "Poets in the City," and that was where it was just they were doing poetry and I think lines of his poetry out in the city and stuff. And yeah, so but I think yeah.
In as succinct of it is the most succinct way that you can put it. Basic way, not too long. just to bring people up to speed before we move into like the hard, before we move into the heavy filmmaking portion of Mick's career. How would you describe a Mick Cusimano film? Mm-hmm. What is a Mick Cusimano movie?
Well, he was still doing
your definition. Go.
He was still doing cartoons. He originally would do cartoons of the Beatles and things, and that whole like '60s kind of counterculture thing. And then he was doing. I guess he must have learned how to do that Flash animation. Or he would and so it was sort of just really the main themes he was interested in were like history, ancient history, archaeology. Rock and roll, right? And so somehow kind of incorporating all that in animation, and then in the live action, it seemed to be usually where he would sort of repurpose his poetry and having actors sort of talk to the camera a lot of times and do his poetry lines. But he did take screenwriting classes at Harvard too. He got a break on Harvard Extension classes while working there, so that was another way he used his connection. So he was trying to get a story. It'd be a lot of like, something happened, there's some MacGuffin and everyone in the city is trying to get this thing or do this
right
thing.
There, that's good. Now bring it in, scale it down, even more succinct than that, because it's a lot of words.
Okay, well, you would say he had a...
I want you to say this. A Mick Cusimano film is...
A Mick Cusimano film is a bunch of sort of ragtag group of people. You had some of those hippie types, older poet types, remnants of the poetry scene, people like us from the cable access TV scene that he would meet. You had some Boston sort of fashion model types, or a few attractive women he would get who would do themselves up for the camera and stuff, and he would sort of repurpose, and you had a very it was sort of very like sort of rough around the edges, like camcorder shots, like lockdown shots. You had people, sometimes they would talk to the camera and do his surreal poetry, and there would be like a little skit or something where they'd be interacting, and sort of roughshod props, right? Like he had the eggs for Don't Spill the Eggs,
right,
or the Sasquatch outfit for Monkey Do, Monkey Don't, and then it would abruptly cut into animation, like this weird sort of surreal acid trip kind of animation, right? Where it'd be like an ancient pharaoh or something, or an alien or something, and it would have that flash animation.
It would have something vaguely related to the movie in the animation.
Yeah.
Like, if it was, I was the lead in Monkey Do, Monkey Don't, so whenever he would have like cutaway animations, he'd have like a crudely animated me.
Yeah, right. Oh, that's true. Yeah, he would sort of make his friends into cartoons too. Yeah.
Yeah, a very, and I don't mean to say, a very rudimentary version of rotoscoping.
Yeah, yeah.
He would use the photo or a still image of the person, draw around them. Mm-hmm. And then, maybe the most he would animate of that person is like their hand waving up and down.
Yeah, and then he had that very, he kept using that, who were those guys? Dagmar? There was like weird, ethereal, like, yeah, and there was like...
Dagmar was like his Danny Elfman.
Yeah. It was, and there's weird ethereal kind of orchestral like music that he kept using, and then he would do voiceovers sometimes for the cartoon portions, right? And it was very eerie sometimes, the uncanny valley.
Fucking eerie. Like, when that music would come on, like, I don't know what it is. It's like, okay, let me just describe. Because we're saying a lot of shit and it might be flying over people's heads, but let's just. So because the only thing that matters in this world
is the
podcast is my perspective and Mike's perspective.
Yeah.
Mainly my perspective.
Yeah, of course.
The way because I'm the original, I'm the spark that listen.
Listen, I created the internet.
I created the internet. I'm kidding. So, but let's bring it up to speed. Lawrence, so you guys are talking about.
But you were on to something there, yeah.
You guys are acting like you're all broken up. Well, how'd you find out about this guy?
Right.
Well, let's rewind the clock back to January 2009. Okay.
Yeah.
Brookline, Massachusetts. It's fucking freezing. It's the middle of winter. Miserable Boston winter where there's like glaciers forming in the roads. And then there's me, 35 years old, having just been shit-canned for my esteemed job at CN8, the Comcast network. I and 358 other people were shit-canned from the Comcast network, regional cable network. Nobody needs to know this. That's why I'm telling you.
That should be the caption for the whole podcast.
Yeah,
that's not true.
I'm looking around for work. Mike is my buddy. With me as always is Mike. But Mike was always in those days. I was more manic, and even though I would come across. You know what it was? Me and you were like in those days, Mike. I was like Lex Luthor, and you were like Otis. because Otis always had he had the common sense.
Yeah.
Luthor was the one who, even though he was a genius, he was a crazy man in a braggadocio and would get himself into trouble with Superman, and that was me.
And it was like delusional confidence that can get you into trouble.
Like, we're both bald.
Yeah. That's good.
And you'd be like, well, Lawrence, Larry, you don't really want to do that with the ladies and nonsense. We won't do this. North. So, Mike, I'm looking around for work. Mike is with me. He's being the Otis. He's like, don't talk about walking into traffic, Lawrence.
Yeah.
And I end up getting a job at Brookline Access Television. In other words, that's the equivalent of I was working at a regional network cable station and I'm back working in public access. I was crestfallen. But it ended up being a cool station, technologically outfitted. Who cares? Anyways, one of the shows we got, I was one of the program directors there, along with this other guy who we won't mention his name because I don't think he wants to be associated with us. Randy McShane was the program. So, anyways, I used to stay there late at night. Like, me and Mike would stay at the station late at night, just video editing. I'd be working on the programming schedule, this, that, the other thing. And we would have the channel on. We'd have the BATV, the Brookline Access Television channel, playing in the background. And every so often, it would cut from, a local selectman meeting, and then the screen would skip a little bit, and then we would hear this very subdued Egyptian music. Like it was like played really low volume, and it sounded like.
It was like,
can you edit in the audio like later on? But
yeah, maybe.
I'll do my interpretation. Like it went from the local selectman going, and we motion to conclude. Thank you. We'll see you all next. Mike and I would look at the screen, and on the screen would be this kind of orange background with a very crudely drawn rooster.
That's right.
Animated rooster. And it was like, Mike and I would look at each other and be like, what is this? it was like a phantom broadcast. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I like the fact that it was on sort of late at night or like early in the morning. Kind of, it was like a Cusimano production. It was like a fever dream, and I just want to say too, it was they were primarily, if not I want to say all, but maybe almost, because maybe I'll leave room for something else. But they were comedies. Mostly, I mean, it was meant to be, but then also teach you some history, I guess, too. You know,
the animation would maybe cut to these people, these interesting looking folks, in what we could tell was Harvard Square, saying nonsense poetry of the spaghetti falls on the acoustic house.
yeah, I'm gonna smack this egg against the dripping spaghetti wall.
Yeah, the lambs of the green sky come.
I like in Don't Spill the Eggs, we do it as a duo, like you and me, and we look like we're in an early MTV thing. And Don't Spill the Eggs, it was like a fish.
You and I look like we're about to kick the shit out of people.
Yeah, we're all trying to be badass and Don't Spill the Eggs, but it was a fish on the shore plays liquid piano for a chorus of attentive starfish.
Why were we so threatening?
I think because we were with our friend at the time, AJ8. AJ8 was rubbing off on us.
Was it the influence of AJ8?
Yeah, our biker badass karate
our
friend.
Fonzie, and we were the nerds getting run off of his cool.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I'm books in your numbers.
I'm Mike the Spike.
But anyways. So Mike and I would see this weird show come on the air, and we'd be like, "Who is this guy?" So then the next day, I asked the programmer Randy McStain. I said, "Hey, who's that guy with the rooster, the animated rooster?" And Randy goes, "Oh, I think he'll like." He goes, "I think he'll like." And Randy McStain talks really slow like this, really slow and deliberate. He goes. I think you and this guy would be peas in a pod. You should reach out to him. His stuff is the shit. And so I go, really? And then he hands me the DVD, and it's got the rooster on it, and the name of the person, Mick Cusimano.
Yeah, you're like, who's this guy, Mick Cusimano? Yeah. And honestly, I didn't know I thought, is this with the crude cartoons, I was just like, yeah, is this a kid? Is it a stoner college kid? I didn't know what to think about it. Yeah.
You're right. That's so interesting hearing your point of view of what I never thought of what you were thinking of it at the time because I was too busy being maniacal.
Yes, that's the problem. Yeah, we need to do a podcast to sort all this out.
That's really what you thought of. You had thoughts and opinions of it.
Yeah, if you ever asked me outside of a podcast.
I just dragged you over to it. I said, "We're gonna go meet this Cusimano." Off in the car, Mike. We're going to go meet this thing.
Yeah, I was like...
Yeah, Mr. Luthor, right? In the car, Mike. Yes, Mr. Luthor.
Yeah, I forget. No, you must have gone... I forget what I was doing, but yeah, like you said, you were... I think the first thing you did with them, well, there was... Sometimes it's confusing because, just like our friend John Hartman from Real Groovy Films, sometimes there'd be the main movie, and then sometimes he would take the footage and you'd be in another supplemental movie. So sometimes it's hard to keep track of what we were in, because I just saw you, if you go on archive.org, I just saw you in a short he did called The Surreal Cafe, which was, I know he used that name a couple of times for stuff, but it was yeah, it was all the different people asking questions of philosophical, existential questions of life to this coffee house waitress or something, and you had a bit in that.
Just want to say, think of Mick the way he would make his movies. Think of it like a deranged version of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah.
So he'd have the main films, and then off of that, he would edit these little offshoots that might have been outtakes or something vaguely related to the main film.
Mm-hmm.
There was a scene that digresses in the main movie, and then you see it in this other thing that he made.
Mm-hmm.
But taken out of context, you're like, what the fuck is this?
Mm-hmm. You were also you got to, I think he was already done with it or in the middle of editing this, which was a big one in retrospect. One of his bigger ones, I would say, was The Mermaids of Atlantis.
Well, that's what I was about to get to. Let me get to that. Mike just said the first thing that I was ever in of Mick's, the first time I ever met him, the first thing I was ever in was Mick's film Mermaids of Atlantis. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of blown away because by this point, Mike and I had already worked with a few different filmmakers. Eccentrics,
as you say.
Eccentrics and filmmakers in the Boston, Massachusetts area. You know, anyone from Quincy Briscoe.
They've probably been on this podcast. It's what we're all about here, of course.
Quincy Briscoe, and then like artist, poet. And in fact, I'll just say it. Mike and I had just come off of like a run of like 2 serious years of working with poet and filmmaker D.L. Polanski, who he's been on the program before, but he's another great, amazing artist as well. But we had just come off of a huge. Mike and I had put on film festival for DL's works early in 2000 or like mid 2009, and we just finished that. By the time we get to Mick, we were a few months done working with DL, so we were a little bit pooped.
And I was like, okay, this is the next era with these guys. And how much more? It was a much less. I mean, DL's productions were much more structured and sort of trying to be a mainstream narrative, like mainstream movie, and he was a much more stressed out, frantic presence.
Well, just because his vision was, that's the thing, here's the contrast between the two, and this is no knock, and DL, if you're listening, I'm not knocking you, because I know we've had some antagonism in the past, and I'm not doing that anymore. What I'm saying is, DL has the contrast between Mick and DL was DL has a very specific vision for his films, down to the way they need to, down to the way like a shadow will fall on something, right? And he will fuss, and I don't mean that in a negative way, but he will work at that until it is to his absolute what he calls perfection. You cut to Mick, and what I was impressed with was, or at least I was struck with, was it was more of a collaborative thing. Like, hey, whoever was there, throw an idea in and we might use it.
Yeah, in that way, it was like a sort of punk rock, very DIY like style, It
wasn't I'm making a movie. It was truly let's make a movie. Like,
and
all of us.
Yeah, it's like our movie, or like and he sent me a card with a bunch of stuff when he sent me those magazines, like thanks for helping with those movies or our movies, and there'll be more. We hope, like it was a group thing. We were doing this thing, and he always honored his friends and never forgot who helped him, do something.
There's a Monkey song. When Mick died, there was a song I was playing. I didn't play it to you because I was about to lose it. But there's a song by the Monkees written by the late Mike Nesmith, and it's called Tapioca Tundra. And I thought about, and I was playing this song like around the time I found out about Mick's dying, because there's a line in it that goes, silhouettes and figures stay close to what he had to say, and one more time the faded dream is saddened by the news. It cannot be a part of me, for now it's a part of you. And it's that last line of like, around the time when Mick realized that he didn't have much longer to go in this world, Mick had sent a little external drives to both Mike and I that contained all of his work, all of his little videos and the films that we were in and whatnot. And almost like in his way of saying, this is as much yours as it is mine. And if anything, it's more yours now because I can't be a part of this anymore. Carry it on. And that's the whole thing about Mick. It's like, as prolific as he was, as hardworking as he was, it wasn't all about him.
Yeah.
You never once felt that there was this big ego, or that he was like this dictator on his films. He was making it to do something with all of his friends and to get out the weird ideas in his head by infecting that idea on all of his
he had the Cheshire grin where he always looked like he was getting away with something, and of course he was, and then
when he made this short film poetry thing called "Don't Spill the Eggs," and anyone who watched it around that time, I remember.
Even he loved, I was like, and it was only years later on that first podcast when I finally got him to do the one-on-one that I kind of got an answer of what it was, something about the eggs from some surrealist, artist or some. But I kept asking him, what does this all mean, and what does this mean? And I think he got a kick out of, because when he did that comic strip of us in Imagine magazine, that's what it was said. It was like a cartoon of me going why did you have us do that, or why did you have us hide the eggs or try to get the eggs or whatever, and then it's the cartoon of him that says, so we can smack it against the spaghetti wall or whatever. And then the caption says, those darn surrealist filmmakers, that is a standout where it's the most surrealist movie ever made, aka seems to have sort of the least amount of obvious meaning to it. It's just these characters running around trying to hold on to these, eggs, out of an egg carton or something, and there isn't really a reason.
People running around holding eggs, stealing eggs from one another, and saying mix crazy poetry.
Idiosyncratic, and what sets it off. And he told me in the interviews it was about trying to get back to that sense of playing as a child too, and making your friends. Turning his friends into live action cartoon characters.
Let's make pretend.
And he was influenced by the classic slapsticky stuff too, the Keystone Cops and stuff like that too, I think. So.
Was he a Marx Brothers fan? I don't remember him talking about.
Yeah, I bet.
He talk to you about Groucho or anything like that.
I bet he was. He also talked about you should talk about deep dives. He mentioned the only precedent for somebody that he going from animation, I guess, into live action, or he mentioned this guy Frank Cashlin, and so I think he did some maybe Looney Tunes cartoons or some stuff from Warner Brothers or something like that, and then directed some live action things or something.
Now let's be. All of that's great, learning about, it's all inspiring, but, what did what was always the more fun thing was...
What is the larger world?
Occasional glimpses about, how did Nick play to the larger world? Now, we hear it experimentally, we don't care what people, who can't... The whole that you do your art, who gives a crap about what people think, but occasionally it is fun to see the reactions of what the, quote, normies say, unquote.
Yeah.
So... Mike and I would run this experimentally ill film festival way back when. We would pool our resources and we'd rent out the Coolidge Corner Theater, big screen. It was a big affair. We'd get right up in the news and all that stuff. And of course, one of the people to regularly enter his films into the festival was Mick. So I remember when we did I still feel like that guy in Howard do the Gene Simmons impersonation. And so Howard, it's the time to cross the because we did this one in 2010. I think it was the third festival we did. It was in 2010. Mike and I were shitting these things out at record speed. And so the big Mick project around 2009-10, other than his Mermaids of Atlantis, was this fucking Don't Spill the Eggs short thing.
Yeah.
All he could talk about,
it consumed him.
All he could fucking talk about that summer of 2010 was Don't Spill the Eggs.
Yeah.
I remember it was all about eggs. We we shot for months in Harvard Square this eggs thing. It was a big deal to him. Like, he was fixated on it. Like, he was confounded by his own thought. And
I think that's what it was. Yeah, you
really
can see
couldn't get
on that one.
He carried around a cup filled with wooden eggs.
Yes, he had like a
joke.
He was like a supervillain with a prop. Yeah.
I honestly thought at the time, this is the thing that breaks him. He's going to go into the institution.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we get it done. Like, we finish the film or the video, whatever. And at the end of the year, we show it. We have the festival at the end of the year, and we show it at the Coolidge Corner Theater. And, you know, so I'll never forget, we're in the audience, we're at our festival, and, like, a bunch of basic, we had a bunch of basic but quirky movies playing, but definitely things that had narratives, you know.
Yeah.
Remember there was the film Couch?
Yeah.
About the guy who falls in love with the couch.
Mm-hmm.
Then there was another one called The Leaves, about these guys who were fighting a sentient pile
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And so we're going through, you know, wacky but basic narratives, and then we get to eggs. Now, we had a packed house.
Yeah, very historic theater, Art Deco theater, Coolidge Corner.
Yeah, very historic, packed house filled with, like, kind of like random college kids who came in off the street.
Yeah, that was always fun to have, like, people just, like, walk in and, yeah. I was like, hey, did you see us in the Boston Globe? And they're like, no.
No, they just wanted to see what it was.
Mm-hmm.
And they didn't just duck into the theater. They bought a ticket to come in.
Yeah.
So, yeah, like, you had couples, and I remember there were, like, a couple, like, you know, like, this pair of couples that were there, and they were watching this shit. And then Nick's stuff, you know, comes on with the Egyptian music. It's like he didn't edit it right, so the volume was way low on the music, and, like, you could hear people sniffling and coughing, and Mike and I kind of looking at each other like, uh-oh. And then the volume shoots up when the person comes on the screen like, don't spill the eggs.
Yeah, it's all like the room sound.
Eggs is like 7 fucking minutes long. And it's pretty much, if you're not really paying attention, it just comes off like a bunch of people routinely saying to you to torture you. They
command you not to do it.
Yeah,
he has a quote from you on his website, like Lawrence Hollie, Experimental Film Festival, that, like, this is a ragtag band of artists and actors commanding you to don't spill the egg. He's like, this is another one of the films that crafting a summary is a pointless exercise because
right, but, like, at first, so, like, you hear the trajectory of the audience. At first, they're laughing.
Mm-hmm.
They're like, oh, you know, they're watching kind of like the fast motion. But then it would cut to, then it's, again, the montage, the mantra, don't spill the eggs. Cut to the next person, don't spill the eggs. And then our buddy AJ doing a roundhouse kick who's like, don't spill the eggs. And at that point, you hear people, I remember hearing someone behind me go, what is going on? Like,
he would love that. I think Mick, like, loved that kind of thing, though. I think that's the whole idea.
Right,
you know?
But then the reviews, then I went on Facebook like a few days later of, like, one of the ladies there was a woman who I did a movie with, and she and her boyfriend attended. Mm-hmm. And I was looking at their, like, little back and forth on their public feed, and she posted just a text that said, don't spill the eggs.
Yeah, that's, like, infamous.
In the comments, their boyfriend wrote, oh my God, that was brutal.
But it screened in, was that the one that was the one where it was turned down by a bunch of festivals, but it got into the Swaziland, Africa, or I think that might have been Cyprus, Greece, one of them.
That's the TV trope.
Yeah.
Big in Japan.
Yeah, it's like there's in the foreign markets, right? They just want to see Americans do any, like, weird thing, and so Cusimano was, like, bigger in other countries because
they think America's just Top Gun Maverick.
Yeah, everything
they don't realize that, you know, there's this dude with, like, with fucking, you know, Albert Einstein hair running around talking about eggs.
Yeah, he's a mad scientist.
With a multicultural cast.
That's right. Different ages, different. He had that was the most varied his stuff was, and I think in terms of the cast at the time.
He was a hit. He went to Cyprus. He went to a festival in Cyprus, fucking Greece.
Mm-hmm.
I remember he actually invited me to go, and stupid me, I'm like, oh, I gotta work at the studio. Like, I mean, now I look back, I'm like, oh shit. Like, and then he told me all about the adventure, how like he went out to the beach in Cyprus at night with the full moon over the water, and there was like bonfires, and I'm like, oh
yeah,
man,
he was always like getting into like adventures where it was like, I forget, you'd have to go back into that earlier 80-something episode of Experimentally Ill with Mick, but yeah, I remember I'm sure he wrote about it on his website too, but yeah, it was always like, oh, they invited me to Paris, France, or London, or they invited me to the Surrealist Art Show, and they introduced me as a full-fledged member of their group, and he was always
you're talking Mick voice, and all these Parisians saying, "Those bully eggs."
yeah, exactly, yeah, and then I think one of the festivals, they wanted to interview him, and then like when they heard he worked at Harvard, that's famous, so they really liked it, yeah.
A testimony that if you're of the right temperament and you believe in your vision and you get behind it and you really work to get it out there, like how you can involve other people and like create a little mini phenomenon around it.
Yeah, he had this like troop of people, and it's weird now because it's like, that group did it, and it's like I mean, he definitely had, like the Squawk Coffee House guys and all the Poet guys.
I think we need to speak about that, Mike, before you go, because on that, like, that's...
But I was just going to say, like, it's hard to tell now, like, who, or maybe time will tell, I think you and I, and he really, because we were younger than some of the folks in his typical group, and I think he really got a kick out of it, like, could tell we kind of appreciated his like scene, and I'm not sure if, because there are some other people who I won't say, but even some people who did a few of his movies and be like, oh yeah, like they were, I would say like my mom really likes the Cusimano movies and really thought it was cool what we were doing, and then she's like, oh, like my mom says those are nonsense movies, or they were in the movies but they kind of like downplayed, and I think definitely through the lens of nostalgia for me it gets magnified, but I always like appreciated that little scene he had like going on, and I'm not sure if everybody was as, I guess that happens too, like like when you're in the thick of the things you don't really realize maybe what's going on, but but you always talked about you'd kind of read about, like back in the day there would be like a little newsletter or magazine, or I remember checking out a book at the Newton cable access station about independent film, and little like microcosms of weird like trends in film, or Cusimano loved talking about the underground and having an underground scene, and so he ended up so he embraced his own little scene, that otherwise maybe wouldn't be. One of the reasons why we want to keep talking about it is to make sure it's documented. So I don't have access to like the corporate overlords. Like I was speaking in a group the other day, like talking about like when you're the Rolling Stones, no matter what happens to those guys, every 5 years there's going to be a reissue of the greatest hits, right? But unless there's a corporate interest, like who's going to be responsible to passing these. Like what before we had media, what was it like telling stories around the campfire or whatever in the tribe? So how can you keep these ideas and these people around and remembered? So yeah.
The pictographs, the ancient pictographs that they see on some rock.
Yeah, Cusimano's cartoons reminded you of cave drawings sometimes, like getting these ideas across.
10,000 years ago, that was some Mick Cusimano.
yeah.
Pulling the tribe together going, the giant dinosaur falls to the spaghetti mammoth.
Yeah.
And they're all like, "Oh, who is this Mick Cusimano?"
Yeah.
But I think like that is something interesting. Is that excuse me? Is Mick was that type of figure who would pull in people into his sphere, and then like a little scene would develop around it, and then when he met us, we had our own little clique of people. You know, Quincy, and this one and that one, other people who we brought along with us to be in some of Mick's films.
Oh yeah, I forgot that we should talk also too about like the second one that we did, which I think you never forget your first. You know, Don't Spill the Eggs for me was a big thing, but
Don't Spill the Eggs in Wales.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Then there was the Whales. That was more like a video short where we were just like saying the poem in a group, where he talked about all these very human, silly things, right? Like whales don't form a deep attachment to Leonard Nimoy. Whales don't go to Star Trek conventions. Whales don't vote Republican. Whales just go splash. But for Monkey Do, Monkey Don't, which was also a poem then, that inspired the movie, like we had our buddy, the great entertainer of the New England area, Quincy Briscoe, was also in that as a sentient giant banana that you chased as the athlete who turned himself into an ape accidentally.
Right, and then our buddy Dave Young was in it. Dave is he's a guy, like another kind of crazy artist guy from Stoughton, Massachusetts. He was in Monkey Do, Monkey Don't. Our old biker buddy AJ8 was in Eggs. So we had all of the guys we collaborated with ended up collaborating with Mick.
Yeah, you could also, that Don't Spill the Eggs 2010 era, you can see out on YouTube of there are only a few of AJ8's short-lived talk show, which I was the co-host on, and you were the producer, director, editor. And Mick Cusimano was a guest on there. You can see that episode out there of his show AJ's 8 Ball. And
never did get DL Polanski on AJ's 8 Ball. I wish that had happened.
Well, yeah, DL said he could tell that AJ8 was going to be trouble. Why, DL? Facial structure.
Oh, that's right. But that's the thing about Mick is that when we would bring in other people into Mick's circle, again, Mick wasn't territorial. Mick loved to him it was the surreal soiree.
Yeah, it was always a soiree. He loved
the fact that the insanity was spreading.
Yeah.
He was like, you got to think of Mick like a benign version of the Joker.
Yeah, a friendly version of the Joker. Yeah.
He didn't want to pollute Gotham. He just wanted everybody to be rhyming about eggs.
Yeah, at the time.
Because if it's driving him crazy, he wants everybody to be talking about it for at least an hour, for about 6 hours.
Yeah. That was a quote from Little Person Wrestler, Tiny the Terrible.
Mick, it wasn't like he sprang to life when Mike and I came along. Like Mick had his own little scene of people.
Well, yeah, and of course it continued for several years up until his passing in was it July of 2022? Yeah.
We'll talk about that in a few minutes because this is the. But I also wanted to take a little bit of a look at Mick's IMDb page and go over some of the films he had a little bit, because I think what's interesting is that the most film of all of his movies, out of all of his cinematic oeuvre, the one that is most like a movie, like the one that you would really call a full-on narrative. It kind of goes in a scale, right? It goes from coherence to it's a series of vignettes strung together with rhymes. But let's see here. Let's fire up. Don't you hate it when like you're firing up the internet during the podcast and it decides to go live in your ass? By the way, audience, Mick was born in 1951. He died July 23rd, 2022, 71 years old. So
yeah, according to whoever put that on IMDb, which happened I noticed that right after the memorial that I attended at the art gallery. So I wonder if someone was like inspired to do that.
So we look here, and we see his directing resume goes as far back as 2006.
Well, and the sad thing is, who knows how totally accurate that is, because he was probably the main.
I don't think it's accurate.
He was like that's the thing when you're when you're at a certain echelon, right, and you have the corporate overlords managing the stuff, and you have enough, and there's enough of a mass appeal where there's the diehard fans, there's more checks and balances of these things, but now it's sort of just up to us and who was in the immediate sphere. It's a.
And with it being up to us, let's look at this list here and let's let the audience know which ones are the actual movies and which ones are the actual kind of. From
what we know, I think.
From what we know,
yeah.
So I'm looking here at the list, and from 2006 I see Valley of the Kings, City of Dark Shadows, Dreams of Leonardo da Vinci, Suspicious Minds, Do You Believe in Genies? And then 2010, here's where we come in. Wales, Don't Spill the Eggs in 2011, Jazz in Venice, 2011. I think we're in that. Early Morning Blues, we were definitely in that one.
It's myself, you, and then Mick and the late Don Rieger, who was a big proponent and supporter, helped Mick produce a lot of movies.
Then there's the big one. And this one is, sadly, the penultimate co-production between me and you and Mick, is Monkey Do, Monkey Don't, which was shot in 2011 but came out in 2012. And then following that, Love at First Sight, Alexander the Great in Egypt, Halloween's for the Birds, Beatniks. The Search for Cleopatra's Throne is a definite movie.
Yeah, I almost was in that. I mean, I had kind of taken a break from acting in these things, and then I almost did that one. But yeah, Don't Spill the Eggs though was the big. That was before Monkey Do, Monkey Don't, right? So.
Right, Red Line, Riding Hood, Next Stop, Grandma's House, and then finally the last one listed is Hold Off from the Wall, which I'm assuming is about Trump. Mm-hmm. So the three movies, if you're getting into mixed stuff, the three works that are bona fide narratives that we know of, the Mermaids in Atlantis. Oh, wait a minute, Mike. Mermaids isn't on here.
Is that on there? We'll have to see if we can get it on there. That was in festivals though, so yeah.
Mermaids from Atlantis or Mermaids in Atlantis. That's a definite narrative. It's all over the place, but there is a through line. Mm-hmm. Then the one that comes across like a real movie almost is, and this isn't tooting my own horn, but it's Monkey Do, Monkey Don't. Mm-hmm. Because you can kind of say that that's the one with the most coherent structure resembling a movie, right?
Yeah, he's like, you have the protagonist of you, and then there's the problem where he wants to be, he's in the shadow of his father, I guess, who was a big athlete, and so then he takes the monkey genes or something at the lab, right? And then becomes the ape, and then he's an outcast of society. He's like on the run from all these people trying to catch him, I guess. And then it veers off into the vignettes where he tries to do speed dating with a bunch of different people. So then Mick got to do his comedy of saying, like, what kind of movies are you into? Oh, I like Gorillas in the Mist, Planet of the Apes.
Yeah, right. It's nonsense. Then the last one is, the last one that we know, like the last narrative film that I know of that I watched recently was The Search for Cleopatra's Crown, which has Mick's go-to actress Gasha. Mm-hmm. Gasha is this woman who was essentially Mick's muse. Blonde, statuesque.
She was like a fashion model in Boston.
Fashion model. She was there for almost all of Mick's movies. And the plot is about her as a college student. And I guess she's trying to pay off her college tuition. And, it's comical. It's over the top. Like the college tuition collector, bill collector.
Yeah. Was that Marcus Niche?
Played by Marcus Niche. This really, he's kind of he's a character. He's a real character.
He might be one of the. With any luck, he'll be one of my next guests for one of the.
Marcus is great just because he's like Mick's Willem Dafoe.
Yeah, that's right. He's a contemporary in some.
Always over the top, plays it up to 11. Energy to spare, and he's chasing down Gosha to get her to steal back her diploma or something like that.
Yeah, they're gonna repossess her diploma.
They're gonna repossess the diploma. So what happens is she stumbles upon Cleopatra's crown in like a dumpster.
Yeah.
And then there's the typical misadventures with Mick. Mick somehow getting involved. I always love when Mick is in the
he involves himself, and it's always a wink to the camera, like
It's the equivalent, exactly. It's the equivalent of like Spielberg being in a film. Wait, what the fuck is that? Because it's like he just can't help smiling the whole time.
It's always like over the top, yeah.
It's like, wait a minute, here's the puppet master, and he's trying to act like, oh, what are we gonna do about your diploma? Then he'll turn to the camera and grin.
Yeah.
Like that's the thing I always loved about Mick is like whenever he was in any scenes, the joy in his face couldn't be contained. That's why I love watching him looking like a little kid getting away with insanity. Looking like a little kid who got away with pouring orange juice into his Lucky Charms. Like, my mom and dad decided, I made my whole family disappear. I made my whole family disappear.
But that's,
So, you see just that utter glee of like, here I am making a film, but it's nonsensical, and I get all my friends to do it, and this is happening. Like even he can't believe it's happening.
Well, and he like would bring it to its, and he was organized enough, like crazy enough to try that stuff and not be worried about people's opinion, and then organized and sort of business minded enough to, do his thing at Harvard, and then and follow through with like submitting into these festivals. And sometimes if there wasn't a category for his movies, they would make like a video poetry category and just like include the stuff. So he defied category, And
I'm just scrubbing through the search for Cleopatra's Crown right now to look at all the mixed scenes. Every fucking scene he's in, he's got a huge ear-to-ear grin.
Well, because he was amazed too, because I guess Gosha had some like fashion student or something create the costume for Cleopatra's crown. It was like the crown and then sort of this like glittery cape, gold cape that she had, and it was like a big deal that they got this stuff. He always had one or two, prominent like props or costumes, right? That like of course there was the ape costume. And then I didn't do the Red Line Riding Hood, red line in reference to the mass transit system. There's a green line, orange line, red line. Yeah, but in the Red Line Riding Hood, there was the wolf. There was a wolf mask, right? And it probably was like the Robert Rodriguez thing, right? Take stock of what you have, right? Or like the B-movie thing, like they talk about on Red Letter Media that we like. Like, we have a mask here. How do we make a whole movie around it? Like.
Exactly. I'm kind of like, it's a little sad. It's a little bit sad here. It's like I'm looking at Mick's YouTube page, and the last post was 3 months ago. Cleopatra meets. It's titled "Cleopatra Meets Walks on the Moon."
Oh, yeah, because he was talking about, like, that's not on the IMDb page, I guess, but that was submitted. He was really, the last time I did an interview with him in February, that's on here as a podcast, too, is he was really proud of he had his surreal. He always talked about like he liked the '60s rock and roll stuff, but he wanted to do a band, but he was a terrible singer, so he just did the poetry. He could just talk the words right, like lyrics, but then in the last act, even he said late in life, right, he did a band that he called the Surreal Soiree, where he had all the troupe of people all with him, and he like repurposed his poems into music. So he had the band, and he chroma keyed in that they were on the moon, right? So he was really proud of like we put the band on the moon, and I guess that was accepted into some film festival in India. So yeah, some section of it, they must have been really. He was thinking that they would be really like bowled over by these effects. That they went to the moon for this movie, I guess, and it was the band doing their thing with Mars or whatever, the moon, I guess, as the background, and then it would cut to like an animated alien with an electric guitar, like joining them.
Yeah, one of his band videos is labeled from a year ago, Matt Gilbert latest SD 480p.
Oh from what I can tell, like, I didn't really know those guys, but from what I've seen, it's that guy Matthew D. Gilbert, and then another guy were like these guys who were electric guitar players, and all Mick needed to say I have a band is he got a couple of electric guitarists, and then got the same, old, hippie crowd to shout his poetry, and he just sort of slowed it down. You talked about one of Mick's more famous poems was Stuck in the 60s, and he did a song version of that, right, that you
like.
Yeah,
he made a legitimate talk song for that one.
Yeah.
With a really kick-ass, it sounds like, when you listen to it, it almost sounds like a Frank Zappa thing from from the 60s. It sounds really garage rocky.
Yeah, they were like a garage band thing.
It's legit. It's really good. I don't know where. Maybe you can put a link in it in the episode description. But that's the other thing. Yeah, Mick. Whatever Mick wanted to do, he did, and he managed to get it out to the world.
Yeah.
He wanted to make movies, he made movies. He wanted to do music, he actually cobbled together a band. Mm-hmm. And they made music.
He got out to venues, right? He would call them up and try to book a show, and one of the places he would do poetry too was the Stone Soup Poets. And I think, Arts at the Armory, and of course Out of the Blue. But yeah, those guys were that Parema, who's running the Out of the Blue at Arts of the Armory now. She was talking about, he was always calling that he wanted to book the band, a few months ago. And then the guy who does Stone Soup Poets talked about if only I had known. Like, I thought it was known that Mick was sick. He had a brain tumor. He had cancer. And he was given a week to live, and then he lived 4 years.
Stop there. We'll get to since we're nearing the end, we'll get to that in a little bit. Don't go into there yet.
But just to say that, if I knew he was sick, I would have. That they weren't doing as many live shows because of COVID, but just that he brought it to its logical, conclusion. Like, he didn't just sit in his basement or something with this idea. It's like, even if it's rough around the edges, he brought it out in front of people. I found an old email today. He was inviting me to at the Cantab Lounge in Boston. The Surreal Soiree is gonna play there, and so yeah.
So on that, as we kind of bring this home a bit, we're gonna start wrapping up. But let's get to the near the end of the Mick story. So, when were you aware of his cancer? Because he ended up with brain cancer. When did you first hear about it?
The guy that we were associated with, Ned Scannell, who screened some of his films with us in the Experimental Film Festival. I remember he did some stuff with Mick, and I remember he I think he had just called me, or I think also Karen Ostromecki, who was also a friend of Mick, and she was an actress in some stuff. So the stuff we were in, like Don't Spill the Eggs and stuff. I think she might have like sent me a message like, "Oh, have you heard about Mick, or he's sick or something?" And then or no, like, yeah, or Ned wants you to call him or something like that. I remember like talking to Ned on the phone like a few years ago, and he was telling me that Mick was just, because Mick was always doing, he talked about you know, the greatest lie in America is you can't do something if you've never done it before. He only ran a few miles originally, and then started running marathons and and so he was always like running around, like jogging and riding his bike
everywhere.
You told me he pointed out he had like huge calves, awesome calves, because he was always riding his bike.
His calves were jacked.
Yeah. So yeah, like a otherwise healthy guy, and then Ned was telling me, yeah, he was just riding his bike or going to work, and all of a sudden he just, like, he couldn't talk, he couldn't get the words out, you know, so they didn't know if he was having a stroke or what he was having, and then they just saw it was a brain tumor, I guess, and he had surgery. It was
Do you remember
removed,
when this was? Like what year?
But it came back. Well, it would have been like 4 years ago, right? So,
And he cheated death the first time.
2017. Yeah, it's like he got it removed, and then of course, what did he do right after the surgery? Is invited me to the Outpost 186 gallery, that's in I think Somerville or Cambridge, right? That used to be the Zeitgeist Gallery, that we screened stuff at. But yeah, and he had like, you know, it was like a wine and cheese kind of thing, or I think there might have been pizza or something. And a lot of people came to that, you know, like Deb Priestley from Out of the Blue Gallery, and I think Hartley, our buddy Hartley Plushaw, who also now writes for Imagine Magazine and is going to do a tribute piece. I put up like a tribute thing to Mick on my social media, and he wants to print that in the article.
Staying on track there, so like you got invited to that thing, and then
yeah, I went there, and then like we got pictures and stuff, and I remember putting I called you up, and I put you on the phone with Mick, and hey, somebody wants to talk to you, and you got to like talk to him, and yeah, I brought my mom, you know, to that, and like Mick was just, you know, delighted to show his movies again, and his brother Nick was there kind of helping him out and stuff. And then he wanted us to hang out after, but I already booked a ride to leave, so I couldn't hang out. And then we were talking about doing another interview, and you know, we just didn't get around to it again, like for a while. But yeah, it was just I don't think he hit. No, well, that was after the band thing, I guess, because a few years before that I did another video interview that I haven't done anything with. Yeah, so, and then he seemed like really, I mean, he had his head was like half shaved, but he was hanging in, he had his wits about him for like a long time.
His wits.
Yeah.
Like his speech definitely took a little bit of a hit.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and he would message me, and sometimes the messages would be like, and this isn't a knock, I'm like, they were just like kind of like jumbled or like a little bit incoherent.
Yeah.
And then I'd talk to him on the phone, and it would be like, oh, there's the old Mick again.
Yeah, only recently he was kind of slowed down, but even then,
it
like,
seemed like he was gonna do fine.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, and you know, I was kind of like in denial a little bit about it, and you put things off. But I'm glad we got, you know, what we got. You know, especially that first audio interview. This is pretty definitive, I think, for life story stuff.
And it's just, but then you know, I'd gone back and forth with him on like you know, Facebook Messenger, talked to him on the phone a few times, and then I hadn't heard from him in a while. And I remember just thinking about him around like, you know, I wonder how Mick, it was like, you know, the typical thing, like I wonder how Mick is doing. I haven't heard from him for a little bit, and then you got in touch with me around what was it, July? Is it the 21st? Was it 22nd?
Something like that. I know. I first saw that. Marcus Nietzsche, right? He posted about it on Facebook, And and then
just in disbelief.
Yeah, well, it was like it just seemed like he would keep like going on because it's like it's like he literally he was given like a week or like days to live or something, and then I don't know what like happened. You just sort of get like distracted, you get like busy. It's like and I would just keep like I would see his stuff. He was posting on Mick before that was like posting on Facebook a lot, and he continued to get into international film festivals and was like passing the movies and cartoons and things on to us, and just like continued to do things. So you just sort of and then that last interview I did, he said, I don't know how long I'm going to live, like 6 months, whatever, like I don't know, my head's going to fall off, like that stuff's going to, he still had a sense of humor about it too. And so it just seemed like, we'll get to do another thing, or I'll get some more footage and stuff. And you always think you have more time than you have, I think. Then I just like heard, and his family was in his family was out in Buffalo, and they did their thing. And then just recently that the Arts at the Armory, tribute. I think there will also be in October of 2022. I think there'll also be like around Columbus Day weekend or something. I think there might be another thing at that Arts of the Armory with the family around, But irreplaceable guy. That's what's sad about it too. I was getting down about it today because it's like, it's not just like he passed away. Like obviously that sucks. And it's not like we like hung out all the time. But I always really appreciated, like you say, that scene that he cultivated, and the attitude, the positive attitude, and that whole like counterculture thing, and it, and just like the spirit that he had. He talked about like people who had like the rock and roll spirit, and that like spirit. And so it's that fear of like, is that going away? Like if he goes. And so like you say, as far as us or other generations, all you can do is like to us, like it's the guy that years from now will say, hey, there was this guy, and like we're doing now, and hopefully to inspire us and to inspire other people. And like how do you keep that going, right? Because like who knows the odds of like, will anybody be accepted by the corporate overlords into the Hollywood sphere or whatever it is, but on borrowed time, acting accordingly to just keep doing your thing. And like why not have I think DL is people with like Make Me Famous. I mean, it's great, these people who became household names and stuff, but for everybody else, the everyman, it's like, it's cool if you invite as many people, and our friend John Hartman kind of does like similar. I mean, you get a lot of people, being in your movies, helping you in these movies, and it's like this party thing, and those are your fans, that is your audience, like, okay, it's, and so, and those guys are the best ones really to appreciate it, because I'm also a film fan, but I can also be a filmmaker, like as are you. So you get like, if you can get creative people to be your fans and your audience too, well, those, all the better really. Like, okay, maybe you didn't reach, like the normies, right? You're not in like the suburban households all over. You're not Walt Disney. Sometimes you're a Frank Castle, and sometimes you're Mick Cusimano. But if you inspire an artist, they go on and make tributes about you, make fan art, right, carry your name and your idea. He is like Batman, because when you talk about the idea of you can do more as a symbol, and Mick was a symbol.
Remember what Ross said to Bruce Wayne? He goes, "You must become an idea." Yeah,
and Mick was that idea of like, it doesn't, to get rid of the perfectionism.
Just to say that there's one more comic book connection for the audience, for Mick, not just Batman.
Yeah.
But let us not forget the time that Mick blinded Superman.
That's right. We forgot about, Christopher Reeve. I guess he just happened to be where it was.
The story is Mick somehow found his way onto the set of Superman 2 back in the early 80s. And he's he's on the set, and he had a huge crush on Margot Kidder, the actress that played Lois Lane. And so Mick, being Mick, you know, he takes out his camera, and so Christopher Reeve, the guy who plays Superman, and Margot Kidder were like walking through a scene or something, and that's when Mick decides to snap his flash camera. And the flash went off and temporarily blinded Christopher Reeve, who tripped.
Oh God! Yeah, the fact that we don't. Yeah, the flash camera, the flash bulb.
And that just seems like so Mick. creating a wacky, surreal little scene where Superman trips by the flashing wall.
Yeah, and then they like threw him off the set or whatever. Didn't he say it was during what was that scene where she like falls off Niagara Falls or the waterfalls?
Scene where she falls off Niagara Falls. I think they shot it at Niagara Falls. That's where it was. Mick was there, and so Mick factors into the DC universe.
Yeah.
Not just by becoming a symbol like Batman, but he's one of the few who blinded Superman.
Yeah, I'm surprised he never made like his own surreal
how did that never
superhero. He never made like a surreal man. He never made like a superhero like send off, right? Take off.
Or even make one of his video skits about it. Like you know, have Argus or Marcus dress up like Superman.
Well, that was the thing. That was the thing about Mick. I mean, he was definitely a storyteller and had the presence of mind to document his story, at least in writing. But sometimes you really had to like pull things out of him, because he was he was sort of a modest guy. That's what I like. He had this like everyman quality. It's like, of course I did this thing, and it's like, dude, that's fucking fantastic stuff you're talking about. You know, like, yeah.
So, you know, the lesson to be learned from Mick is just what you said. You know, time is tight. You get up and do what you want. Try not to let the bullshit stop you. Maybe the corporate overlord's not going to pluck you. You know, the gods may not be plucking you out from the
plucked from by the gods.
As Rod would always say, you know, you're going to be plucked from the gods. You know, the people who come to Hollywood thinking they're going to be plucked from the gods are going to have a rude awakening. You can't stop. You can't stop.
Yeah.
There's a buddy of mine, Gary. His name is Gary Rafat. He's a British man. He's a DP, director of photography, and he said to me the other day, he's like, he's making his own movie right now, boxing movie, like for almost no money. That looks phenomenal. And he goes to me the other day, he goes, Lawrence, no matter how down you get, or no matter how many, you know, maybe the opportunities aren't coming along as much as you want them to, he goes, never stop shooting.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, always keep the camera rolling.
Mm-hmm.
He goes, whatever it is, he's like, you know, you create, he goes, keep creating, keep it up. And that was Mick.
Mm-hmm.
Kept it up right. You know, he got the diagnosis that he had 5 months. Did he sit around crying? No.
Mm-hmm.
He created until the end and even secured his legacy by sending his videos to his friends.
Yeah, exactly. He said, I want people to see what I'm doing or what I've done, you know? So, yeah.
And here we are doing a podcast about it. So,
yeah.
You know, folks, it can be rough. The world can be a crazy place. I know how hard it can be here in Hollywood. I'm out in Los Angeles right now. Mike is in Needham. And there are times I get down. But you just got to keep going. You always got to regroup and stay true to your vision, even when the times get tough. And keep it up, because that's how our buddy Mick would want it. If I could end it, Mike, one more. If I could just end, please, with that one line again for the Monkey song. Is that cool?
What about the other one? Experimental film.
I'll end it with a line from experimental film from They Might Be Giants. The line, They Might Be Giants had a song called Experimental Film. And that was my theme song for Mick. I actually played it for him back in the day. And he's like, oh, yeah. He goes, that's a cool song, yeah.
Mick, because I think that's a good consolation for us though too. Is maybe especially you at that time, but then me definitely when I last did the interview with them, talking about like, hey man, you did like so many cool things and you always inspired us, and just like we would gush to him. So it's not like there's necessarily things that were left unsaid. I mean, I wish I got other footage or So
here's the line from the experimental film. It goes, yeah, you're all gonna be in my experimental film, and even though I can't explain it, I already know how great it's gonna. And then it repeats, yeah, you're all gonna be in my experimental film, and even though I can't explain it, I already know it's gonna be great. And that was Mick. He always had it in his head that the thing he was doing was gonna be to his spec, to his liking, and part of that joy for him was that we were all going to be a part of it. We all had a part of it. He didn't do it in a vacuum. And I don't have any old shame, and I know you don't. I'm so glad that we found this crazy guy and got to be in some of his weird little films. And if there's an afterlife, I hope he's doing all right. And if not, it was quite the time. Let us be as courageous with our projects. And let us be as prolific.
Yeah, I just remember him saying like, if you just make a movie, keep it under your bed, nobody will know you're a filmmaker. So he was always, remember the other thing, he helped us edit one of the experimental festivals, the whole reel, and then he was one of the, when I first got in touch with the TTNHD guys who would do like local film interviews and interviewed us. He was the only, other than us like running the show, he was the only filmmaker who showed up early enough to get an interview, and just always had a mind to, wasn't necessarily trying to be famous like these, influencers or whatever on social media today. It was about getting the message out, but he understood like, hey, no one will know about it if I don't like talk about it and take an opportunity. And if you don't get them, like you say, you just do your best and make the opportunities,
Make your own luck.
Yeah.
So that's it. We'll do another one on Mick at some point. I think there's more to say about Mick, and maybe a more coherent, a more scholarly way. I can make like some bullet points and whatnot, but I think this was good to get it out. So, all right, Mike, close it out.
Yeah, I would just say, check out Mick's site, mcusimano.tripod.com, and he's on, YouTube, Mick Cusimano. And if you don't know Mick, you should check his stuff out, and just if you take away anything from this show, it's like, what we say, just it's about the spirit of Mick and that idea, and that's the way that he lives on, and that's the way things that keep getting passed on, through the generations. And we always, there's the fantasy of, big time fame and fortune and stuff, but time being limited, sometimes it's just about getting together with your friends and being productive, making something that you can pass on, and if you can make people laugh and entertain people along the way, and making memories, really, because it's great that everything can be recorded and kind of like live in perpetuity online, but who knows how long that stuff will be around. Some website goes down or whatever, so just, get copies of it. It's nice, we can look at photos and things, but it's really about how people made us feel. And, Mick really, we really had a good time, and he just got a kick out of us, and we got a kick out of him, and always express gratitude that he was, like, we were helping him, but really he was helping us because he was showing us the way to be, and really the way to live and lead by example. And that's the bigger idea too, and I think it's like, at the end of our lives, it's not, these little, it's sort of the overall, thing that we did, and the message, and people won't always remember each little thing you said or did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And it's like that positivity, even in the face of, as Kevin Smith would say, eventual unavoidable death. It makes little sense to not at least try to attain your dreams, and that's what Mick was trying to do. And in trying, like they say, the journey, it's not about the destination, it's about the journey. And so Mick kind of kept like going on this journey, right? And it was a privilege to be a little part of that. And yeah, even makes some dips into the mainstream. I've yet to check out. I think he was an extra in the casino scene in American Hustle. I think with Christian Bale when it came here, and yeah, just to try things. Just some things need to be attempted and done just to see that they can be done. It's not always about money or status. And Mick was like this everyman kind of guy that he didn't seem to really, at the end of the day, care about like fame and fortune. But it's like that's the ironic part. Is like that's what made him so like legendary, so like celebrated. Is like you say, it wasn't always about him. He was including everybody and just always grateful, and we had a good time, And if that gets you remembered, like, and that great, that was what was so memorable about him, is that, like you say, that Cheshire grin, and so it was just awesome to be a little part of it. And like you said, you were interested in it because you would always hear about these little scenes that would like bubble up, and those Squawk Coffee House guys, and also his buddy Lee Kidd, I think, was also instrumental in doing the whole Squawk Coffee House thing in the movies too, and these guys that are kind of going away, and so well, eventually we'll all go away. So if we can feel good and get a message across at the same time, like, that's awesome. So
well
yeah.
said, Mike.
Yeah.
And what's the catchphrase of the podcast?
And as we say here, well, I wanted to end it. We could say, and if you don't remember anything from this show, always remember, don't spill the eggs. But also for Experimental Ill, I'm Michael O'Toole, of course, and for Lawrence Hollie here, and for our buddy Mick Cusimano, the professor of surrealism. And this will either be 110 or I think 111. And what is it? September 15th, 2022. I will say, always remember, take a negative, turn it into a positive, try to have a positive attitude, right? And it's all about the way you think about things. Or as Wayne Dyer said, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so here we'll say, where there is an ill,
yes.
Unexperimentally ill, where there is an ill, there is a way. So, be part of the experiment.
Okay, thank God you said that because my OCD was going crazy.
Right here on Experimentally Ill. And check out some more on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Anchor.fm, and of course, experimentallyIll.com.
And the world. Thank you. Bye.
Good night.
Yes.
Where there's an ill, there's a way. Be part of the experiment. Right here.
Of condos line the desert of the town. Ruins of a culture spawned by electric sound. The expedition works its way to Harvard Square. Anachronistic figure in jeans over there. back then. Peace marches, deadheads, and psychedelic zen. Now it's come computer games and a high-tech blizzard. How can I compare to Jim Morrison's blizzard? And we're stuck in the 60s, like down in the snow, reliving old journeys that only he can know. He's stuck in the 60s, like a car in the snow, reliving old journeys that only he can know. The magical mystery tour has suddenly come to an end. But time can stand still if we At the Maharishi, Timothy Leary, on the street. He's moving closer. No, it's a policeman on his beat. Move along, hipster. Woodstock's now a pasture. Get that software over in the office one step faster.